Tonight we're in Ealing in West London. Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, James, cleverly elected to Westminster in 2015. He voted in favour of Brexit in the referendum and is now Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. Labour's Shadow Treasury Minister, he supported Jeremy Corbyn's leadership campaign but left the front bench in 2017 over the party's decision to vote for Article 50. Clive Lewis. Ian Blackford, the leader of the SNP at Westminster and the only member of tonight's panel to argue the case for the UK to remain in the EU. Catherine Barnard, Professor of EU Employment Law at Cambridge University. And talk radio host, journalist and wholehearted Brexiteer, Julia Hartley Brewer. Welcome to our panel, to our audience here, and of course to you at home. You know this by now. You can argue along using hashtag BBCQT on Twitter, on Facebook and on Instagram. Right, let's kick off, after what a night at Westminster, with our first question. George Head.
Hi. Is there purpose to extending Article 50, or are we simply delaying the inevitable?
And what do you think the inevitable is?
No deal.
No deal. James?
I, earlier on this evening, voted against extending the Article 50 process. I've always felt that extending it without a very explicit reason for extending wouldn't actually be beneficial. And I know the timing is getting tight and that is uncomfortable. It is disconcerting. It's disconcerting for, I know, people in the audience, for business people I speak to. But I do think we are quite close to getting a resolution on this. And if we are able to get agreement on a withdrawal agreement, then I would be more than happy to consider a small, what we call a technical extension, to get through the legal processes that we'd have to get through in Westminster to deliver that. But an extension, just for the sake of having an extension, I don't think would solve any of the problems, and it would just increase the period of delay and uncertainty. That's why I'm uncomfortable.
So you say we think we're close to getting a deal. Theresa May's deal?
Well, the simple truth of the matter is that at this stage, the idea of having a complete rewrite or start again from scratch, now the Labour Party keeps talking about this fundamentally different deal, I just think that's incredibly unrealistic. We are very close to getting this deal done.
We're not very close in terms of voter numbers.
Well, actually, the overall numbers, it's not the only thing, because a lot of people that voted against...
It is the thing, because unless you get the numbers, you can't get it through.
Yeah, but a lot of people voted against the agreement for the same reason. If you can get some change to that one reason, which is about the temporary nature of the backstop, I think a lot of people, including members of the DUP, members of my own party, members of the Labour Party, will all be able to change their position and vote for the deal. And I think there is a chance, not a guarantee, but there is a chance of getting that through.
Well, let's come to that backstop issue later on. But, Julia.
Wait. Is there any purpose in delaying...
Extending Article 50?
Well, no. The only purpose, of course, is to thwart the will of the referendum result from 2016. I'm trying to work out exactly what MPs have voted against so far. They voted against Theresa May's deal. They voted against a customs union, EEA remaining, no deal. They voted against the second referendum. They voted against the Malthouse Compromise. They probably vote against the Bourne Ultimatum, if that ever came up as well. But they did vote for one thing. They voted to give us a referendum. And they said that they would implement the referendum result. And then they voted to trigger Article 50, which had in it, no surprise, basically deal or no deal. We would leave 2 years later on the 29th of March 2019. It didn't say if we've got a deal everyone's happy with. It said we would leave. So
you'd be happy with no deal?
I'd be very happy with no deal. I want us to leave the European Union. We were asked a question. We gave our answer. We expect MPs to listen to us.
Well, there's a lot of applause. There's also a lot of people just sitting on their hands. So it may not be quite as it comes across through the television screen. Clive Lewis?
Well, the whole purpose of the votes that were taking place today were to give Parliament, over this week, to give Parliament some options to be able to vote on, to be able to move this forward. But the government basically voted most of those down. So we're in the situation where we find ourselves, again, taking one step forward, one step back. Look, ultimately, the reason we are in this mess, and I'm not trying to play a blame game here, I'm simply stating what I think are to be facts, which is that Theresa May had an opportunity 2 years ago to go to the British people, to go to Parliament, to go to civil society, to trade unions and say, how do we begin to bring our country back together, the 52 and the 48? How do we move forward to try to achieve something which can actually bring the country together that we can find consensus on? But rather than a conversation with the country, she wanted to have a conversation with the Conservative Party. And we are now in an absolute mess on the brink of a devastating no-deal Brexit, and that is that...
Hang on, someone shouting out Labour's in a bit of a mess as well.
Well, it's a Conservative government that have led the charge on this, that have been in control of this process for 2 years. They've been dealing with the negotiations for the vast bulk for the entire 2 years. So I'm afraid to say, to try and blame the Labour Party for the mess that we're in is quite frankly ridiculous. This lies with Theresa May and the Conservative government because they're the ones in the driving seat and they're the ones that are messing this up.
And this is not a blame game.
It's the reality.
Yeah. The blame game started early. Yes, sir, you had your hand up.
I think Julia was being a bit disingenuous because I think if you genuinely, in your conscience, believe that a no-deal Brexit is going to be harmful to the country, you have it. I know you don't, but if, as a politician, you have that sense in your mind, in your conscience, that it is the wrong thing to do, I think it is your duty to try and delay Brexit, to find something that would work and that you think is best for the public good,
essentially. Then they shouldn't have voted to trigger Article 50, should they?
Yeah, absolutely.
They shouldn't have stood on manifestos in 2017. 86% of MPs sitting in Westminster stood on a manifesto from their party which said that they would respect the Brexit vote.
But, Julia, what makes you so confident about no deal when you've got a whole array of voices saying... You've got the CBI saying no deal is a sledgehammer hanging over business. You've got the Bank of England governor saying no deal would cause an economic shock. You've got government analysis saying a no-deal Brexit would hit GDP by 9.3%. Yeah. You're not bothered about any of that?
Well, the fact that the former governor of Bank of England thinks it will be fine. Many business leaders are absolutely fine, particularly entrepreneurs, the people who actually build businesses rather than middle managers of corporations. No, I've got every confidence, and I tell you why. It's because I've got confidence in our nation. I don't think we're unique among nations around the world where we can't run our own business. We can't decide our own laws, decide who can live in our country, decide what tariffs we want to have. I find it absolutely bizarre that so many people, both voters and politicians, have so little faith in our country and our people and our future that they believe that we uniquely in the world can't go it alone.
The woman there.
Yes, I just would like to speak to Mr Lewis there. I think it's incredibly rich of Labour to point fingers at the Conservative Party when Labour themselves don't seem to have their own clear policy on Brexit.
Can I come to that? I think, look, whatever the situation you think the Labour Party are talking about, it's been quite clear. It has tried to negotiate. It has tried to negotiate with Theresa May to say, well, we need a Brexit which will protect jobs, protect the environment, allow us access to the custom union and to the single market. So, look, I think that's been quite clear. We're now moving to a stage where we're saying Parliament is at an impasse, and it's time for us to move towards a final say for the British people. But I just want to come back to Julia. If you're diabetic, then I don't think that you're going to be that happy with what is going on in terms of a no-deal Brexit. And look, if you've got confidence in Chris Drayling's preparations for no deal, then you're a braver person than me.
Well, I tell you what, hang on, don't call out. There's so many of you got your hands up. I'm going to come to you in a minute, Catherine and Ian. I'm just going to get a few more people from the audience. Yes, you there with the glasses. It
seems to me the main problem is that it's neither Labour nor Tories that are to blame. It's Parliament that is to blame. I mean, Parliament was instructed to execute Brexit. It's not brain surgery. And ever since then...
Well, thank God it's not, because we know where we've been.
Well, that's right. I mean, since then, the Remainers have deliberately, over a long period of time, sabotaged the whole process. Now, whether that's right or wrong is irrelevant. Everything is based on rumour and basically nobody knows what is really going to happen. It's all projection.
The woman in the front there.
I think we need to leave with a deal because we can't trust the politicians, the MPs, Parliament to negotiate anything for us if we crash out of Europe.
You wanted to make a point, the man sitting next to you.
Yes. what we're not looking at is the question of democracy. We had a referendum which was based on lies and deceptions and misrepresentations on both sides, and it also had a financial fraud which was looked at and dealt with. There was a problem there. We also had a situation where Parliament tried to go ahead with the Prime Minister tried to put Article 50 forward without Parliament. We also had a situation where Gina Miller had to come in along and say we want Parliament involved, not the government involved. We need to have democracy. We need to have to go back to the people and say what's going on. If it was a business, the business would have been sued for misrepresentation.
So you want another vote? Are you saying you want another vote?
Yes.
Right, OK.
And why has the Labour Party, which said in its last conference we want a vote, why has it not agreed it this time round?
OK. Clive, I'm going to come to that, if that's all right, because I want to get around quite a few of you before I come to you there. Yes, the man there.
It seems like part of the reason why this has become so divisive, even after the vote, is that during the campaign, there were so many different voices saying what kind of Brexit we could have, be a hard or soft Brexit. No one really knew, but they could align themselves with whichever aspect of that they particularly liked. And it's become clear recently that Theresa May's deal is the only one that we're going to get. Jeremy Corbyn isn't going to be given the opportunity to negotiate the deal, and Theresa May can't be shifted as leader of the Tory party until the end of this year. So it seems like the only way that we can actually move forward, rather than have this same deal voted on 4 times through Parliament, is to put it to the people again and in black and white, this is the deal, this is the effects of it, or is that preferable to remaining in the EU?
And just the man in front there. Yes,
I believe that the tit for tat in Parliament has basically been a key element in the deal not being passed through Parliament, and I believe that if Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn can get along with each other, then they could obviously come up with a right deal and not just be there for their own personal gain.
All right. Ian Blackford, let's go back to the question. Is there purpose to extending Article 50? Are we simply denying the inevitable?
No, we simply have to extend Article 50. And I say that whether you're a leaver or a remainer, because the simple fact of the matter is we are 2 weeks away from leaving the European Union. I have to say, look, this is frightening, and I understand all the frustrations that are being expressed by the audience, and that's replicated in other places as well. And there's a responsibility, of course, that we have as politicians. But when you look at the facts of the matter, look at what has happened. When Theresa May brought her deal in front of the Commons, she lost by 230 votes. It was the biggest defeat in parliamentary history. And what she did this week, on the back of that defeat, she brought what is in effect the same deal back again. Now, what we've done this week really has to be important, because Parliament has expressed a very clear view that we don't want no deal. And I have to say to you that I've seen a lot of the government papers. I've been blessed to be able to do that. And it is frightening. And you've got to take seriously the risks that are there. And I have to say to Julia that we are talking about potential supply chain problems. We are talking about issues with people that are reliant on medicines. We're talking about risks to the supply of foods. Now, when you consider that the primary responsibility of the government is to look after the security and the economic security of its people, you've got a government that is threatening that. And when you look at the threats which are there, and the Scottish Government analysis shows in Scotland that we risk losing 100,000 jobs, we've got a UK government that, if we had a no-deal scenario, would bring on a recession which would be significantly greater than what we had with the financial crisis. That's madness, and that has never happened in history. So we've got a responsibility to get through this. And I have to say, and I've got a lot of respect for Clive, because I know that he shares some of my views in terms of where we should be going on this. But I was absolutely gobsmacked today that there was an amendment that was brought forward that would allow us to have a people's vote. And we need leadership from the Labour front bench. And I was just absolutely appalled when Labour said, now is not the time. Well, goodness gracious, 2 weeks away from the intended leaving date. I used the expression in Parliament that a shiver ran along the Labour front bench and couldn't find a spine to climb up. Because, you know, that's the reality. But there is no such thing, and I have to say to you, and this is nothing about how people voted in 2016, because we now know the facts. And the UK government's own analysis, James, shows that in every form of Brexit, that we are going to be worse off. No. We are making our countries poorer. No, and that is just completely unacceptable. And on the basis of what we know now, it is only right that people are asked to give an affirmative vote one way or the other. And if that's what people vote for, then fine, that's what you can have. But one thing I will say to you is that the people of Scotland will not be dragged out of Europe against our will. We voted to remain, and we'll be remaining a European country.
Well, we might come later exactly how you're going to do that. But anyway.
Happy to do that.
Now, we'll come on to a second EU referendum. But Catherine, I just want to come to you on the original question. Is there purpose to extending Article 50 or just delaying the inevitable?
So if you think that a no deal is acceptable, then there's absolutely no point in extending Article 50. If, on the other hand, you think that no deal is not acceptable, and that's what the majority of the Commons thought this week, then you do need an extension. And that's for two reasons. One, if what's happening is that Theresa May's deal does eventually go through the Commons in the next week or so, then you're going to need more time, because that's not the end of the story, I'm afraid, because that deal, her agreement, needs to be translated into law in the form of the WAB, the Withdrawal and Implementation Bill. And that's going to take some time, and that's why you need a technical extension. If, however, the Theresa May's deal doesn't go through Parliament in the next couple of weeks, and you don't think no deal is acceptable, then we're going to need much more time, and that's why the EU is talking about a year to give us time to have either a general election or a second referendum or some serious rethinking of the arrangements. But that's why you need extra time if you don't think a no deal is acceptable.
Now, we had a number of questions on the second referendum. We might as well go to it now. David Zerdin, whereabouts are you? Right.
If Theresa May's plan is allowed so many votes, aren't the people allowed a second vote?
Now, Clive, you are in favour of a second EU referendum.
I am indeed.
But then there are people within your party who are not. I mean, you've got the Shadow Education Secretary, Angela Rayner, who says she thinks that would be disastrous.
And it's a very difficult issue. It's an issue which cuts across political parties. I mean, parties have split over this issue on both sides of the House. And therefore, I understand it's difficult for many members to be able to represent the interests of their constituents and the interests of the country. And they may also have personal views on the European Union, etc., etc. But look, I am in favour of a final say for the British people, partly because of the reason that the gentleman gave, that it's right that people have a right to be able to express themselves.
So why didn't you vote for it today?
So, well,
that's the obvious thing, isn't it?
Well, the PV campaign itself recommended...
PV, I think just translate people's vote.
The public vote, the People's Vote campaign. Better for Britain.
Last time?
Was it Squirrels? Both said that this was not the time to vote for the PV. And I'll and thank you for respecting.
Why isn't it the time?
It's not the time because at the moment, tactically, if you're going to get one shot at this, and this wasn't even a binding amendment. So, look, Ian, I understand why you voted for it, but look, I don't think even Carolina Lucas, who's been one of the most vociferous individuals on a public vote, voted for it. There was only about 25 Labour MPs who voted for it. And the reason is because the PV campaign were quite clear. This is not the time. This wasn't the time to vote for
Clive,
it. And I have to question why you wanted to vote for it when the PV campaign itself said this wasn't the time.
That's not true.
I think it's more the case that you're looking for a nice line on your next set of leaflets against Labour candidates up in Scotland and actually in the interest of what this country should be doing next, which is making sure that when we do have that vote, on a final say for the British people and whatever the deal that comes through Parliament is, that we have a fighting chance of winning it. Not just posturing, because I actually want to see the British people given a final say on whatever comes through Parliament. That's the difference.
Clive, you know that's not true, because I've worked on a cross-party basis, I've worked with others, and it's not quite the case that the People's Vote were against us today. Look, I didn't bring the amendment. No, there's one individual that published that, but that's not the view of the PV board. But the fact is that we tried to work on a cross-party basis. That amendment came forwarded not from us, but on the basis it was there, that was the opportunity to say, now is the time that Parliament can take effect. But I think, to come back to the question is absolutely right, because the Prime Minister's lost twice on her deal. She's going to bring it back again next week. How many times is the Prime Minister going to ask Parliament to vote for her deal and get the same answer. Yet, she's saying that the people of the United Kingdom shouldn't get a second vote.
Well,
the Prime Minister should recognise the democracy of Parliament. And there is an understanding in Parliament that you don't bring the same legislation forward in the same session. She's actually ignoring the precedent and the protocol in Parliament. This is a government that's failed, and quite frankly, it should be gone on the basis of all the votes that they've lost. We should be having a general election, and we need people that can come in and lead Parliament. It's missing from the Tory and the Labour Party. And actually, Clive, I'll tell you, all 35 SNP MPs have been united, clear, consistent and with a clarity ever since the referendum. You should try it.
James, I want to go to the audience in a minute, but the point is, if Theresa May is able to, or is going to bring back her deal 3 times, should the public not get a second shot?
I mean, we've seen here both the Labour Party and the SNP talking about the best tactical way and the timing of this, and trying to use this as leverage to trigger a general election. The Labour Party have said quite explicitly and regularly that they were voting against this because what they wanted was to trigger a general election. Neither have been acting in the national interest. The government, the Prime Minister, has put forward the option, through the withdrawal agreement, of leaving the European Union in good order, with a transition period that allows businesses to move from the current situation to the new situation. And had either of the other 2 politicians on the panel really cared about respecting the referendum result and doing so in a way that gives business all the time they need to change their business processes, they would have voted for the withdrawal agreement. And that's what they should have done. That's what I did. I don't want to leave without a deal, but I absolutely insist that we respect the referendum result, unlike the 2.
Okay. Well, hang on a minute, panel. Let's hear. This is a wait a minute. This is a programme for the audience as well. Let's hear from you.
Me?
Yes, you, sir.
Thank you. 2 points, really. We all are clamouring for a second vote, but what is to say that if it comes to Remain, the Brexiters will not ask and should not be given a 3rd vote or a 4th vote, and this can go on. But more importantly, this is a question about the no-deal scenario. The worst-case fear-mongering scenario was presented to us at the time of the campaigning for Brexit. People overwhelmingly, if you look at parliamentary constituency-wise, overwhelmingly voted for Brexit, taking into account all the hardships they would have to encounter. Now, as representatives of the people, you're obliged to deliver us at Brexit, either in a deal scenario or a no-deal scenario. If now the government has failed by not preparing for the worst, all the scenario that you're speaking of, it is their responsibility, having known that this scenario is possible, to prepare for that, not to scare us at the last minute about that. By taking a no deal off the scenario, you've simply been lazy, you've copped out, and you have actually weakened the government's position and our chance to get a very good deal from the Europe.
Yeah. Woman there. Yes, the woman there.
Professor Barnard as well, particularly. The fact that this is becoming a political matter and it's the politicians who are negotiating this deal and voting it down, why have we not had the judiciary and our lawyers involved in this complicated negotiation?
Well, the courts have gotten, obviously, with the Gina Miller right at the very beginning. I'm going to take a few questions, actually, before I... a few points and questions before I carry on. Yes, the man there in the light chair, yeah.
Why would people trust a second referendum when the result of the first one wasn't honoured?
Is there anyone here who supports the idea of a second referendum? Yes. Oh, my gosh! You've all been sitting on your hands, so the woman there in the check jacket.
I've been sitting here listening to these really gung-ho comments about it's all about the Brexiteers, but it was 48-52. What about the 48%, which is a... Now, I'm just talking about who's thinking about how close that vote was, who's thinking about trying to come up with something that is really about everybody in this country. Yes. There are two years' worth of 18-year-olds who now could vote. I worked in schools, I've come across young people who were devastated by the referendum result. I know that you could always argue that, but I think we need to think very, very seriously about what people think now, as opposed to 2 years ago. And once there is a proposed deal, take it back and let people see what they think.
All those hands shot up and then you put them all down again. Who else was in favour? Just to hear the other point of view here. Yes, you're looking terribly keen there with your glasses on there, yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Firstly, during the first vote, right, a lot of disinformation was given. Let me say the 350 million for the NHS on the bus. And also to the most discredited politicians of our time, Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, were taken seriously then. What we want now is a people's vote,
We want the vote honoured.
No.
We want democracy to be effective. The will of the people.
No, it wasn't the will of the people. It was the will of Farage and Boris Johnson.
And we want it.
And they had too much sway. They had too much sway. They were too much taken seriously. I'm with Clive. I think they should have a people's vote. And I think, no, you
Hang on. What we're seeing here is a microcosm of what we saw in Westminster today. So let's have a microphone over you, sir, as well, in there, Roger. So let's... Go on, have that argument.
OK, right, well, what I was going to say is people were given a lot of disinformation. I was at the Labour Party conference. I said to Angela Eagle at the time, I said, that Boris, you know, he's got that 350, you know, well done for saying, get the 350 million off that bus. It was a lie. Now, a lot of people voted because they like Boris, and I actually think now he's been discredited, the result will be very different.
Yes, you in the glasses.
We had a referendum, right? That wasn't meaningless, or was it? Because what it was, if we have a third referendum or a second referendum, where does it end? Why don't we just honour what the people voted for, and then take a view as to whether or not that was right or wrong? The people voted for a reason. They got out of their beds, they went down to the polling station, and they voted. It is nothing but sheer arrogance. Arrogance of people that have lost, and people that want to subvert democracy, that we are now asking for a third referendum. Well, get on what the people voted for. Whether you like it or whether you're not, people voted for a reason. And it'll be the end of democracy in this country if we can't honour what Parliament said that they would do 2 years ago. They've had 2 years to do this. They haven't done it. It's not people's fault. It's Parliament's fault for not getting his own house in order. And for people, the parliamentarians ahead of us today, to say, well, we need more time. We only need more time because you failed, gentlemen. Yes. You failed.
Catherine, from your Cambridge ivory tower, what do you make of what you're hearing?
So in answer to the lady's question about why weren't lawyers involved, well, of course, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen the Attorney-General was involved and has been trying to negotiate on the backstop. The Civil Service have got lots of lawyers who have been involved in drafting the text of the withdrawal agreement. But what is striking is that the withdrawal agreement itself, that's Theresa May's deal, the first draft was drafted by the EU and not by us. And, of course, that has already put us onto the back foot because the EU has been leading this process. Specifically on the point about the second referendum, it is worth bearing in mind that we would need a very significant extension in time, going back to the earlier question, because the second referendum is not straightforward. You need an Act of Parliament. You need to agree on the question. Will it have 2 limbs, leave or remain, or 3 limbs, leave, remain, or Theresa May's deal? What's the franchise going to be? Who's going to vote? Will it be the same franchise last time when EU nationals in the UK couldn't vote and the 16 to 18-year-olds couldn't vote? Or do we say we have exactly the same franchise as we had before? These are big questions. It's going to take time to sort out. And that's why it's not to be undertaken lightly to go down the route of having a second referendum.
And talking about lawyers' involvement, of course, we've got Geoffrey Cox now, Attorney-General, who's looking again, at the question of the Irish backstop. There was all this talk about Cox's codpiece. Is that going to turn into a fig leaf? Had to get that in. Come on. I can't let them all have the best lines. What's your view on your lawyerly view on that?
Yeah,
it's all about the Vienna. They're now looking at the Vienna Convention.
Yeah, at the moment he had this his opinion. It's 19 paragraphs, and everyone focused on the last paragraph, which was very much about the legal risk being that not much has changed. But actually, he also takes a more nuanced view, and he does say, but the political risk is reduced. And actually, the renegotiation last weekend, I know it all gets a bit blurred one into another, but the renegotiation, they did get some concessions, not dramatic.
But the thing is, Catherine, it wasn't enough. So in a sense, we're beyond that now. So now Geoffrey Cox is looking at it again, and there's some talk. You might be more familiar with this talk than I am, James, in terms of the ERG and the DUP, and possibly using the Vienna Convention, which is an international treaty, to see if that is a way of making the Irish backstop no longer a problem.
I'm afraid I don't think the Vienna Convention cuts the mustard. I mean, there are various provisions that people have mooted. I'm sure you're not probably desperate to hear what they are, but there are various provisions, and all of them have significant weaknesses. They really will not cut the mustard in order to deliver that guarantee that we can get out of the backstop. And of course, the EU would never agree to us having a unilateral right to leave the backstop. It's a bit like an insurance policy. The EU sees it as an insurance policy, and you don't want a hole in your insurance policy the moment your house catches fire, and that's why the EU would not accept a complete unilateral right to withdraw from the backstop.
Hang on, let me just hear from Judy. We've not heard from Judy. And just coming back to the second referendum question, which is what we were originally talking about, I just want to take advantage of the fact, of course, we've got a lawyer on the panel, is when the lady there who's a teacher talked about maybe getting the younger generation in, the 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds who weren't able to vote for, and you groaned.
No, absolutely absurd.
Why did you groan?
For goodness sake, there are people questioning, well, you're not allowed to even buy cigarettes at the age of 16, not allowed to get married without your parents' permission. You're not allowed to have an alcoholic drink in a pub. But we're saying you should be able to vote. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yes, exactly. You have to be 18. When you're 18, you're an adult, and then you get to vote.
Julia,
I don't know. I'm sorry. I just think it's absolutely absurd.
We allowed 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in our referendum.
And I thought that was wrong too.
Well, I have to say to you that it was fantastic. It was fantastic seeing the engagement of young people that took place. The turnout was fantastically high.
Can I say there's absolutely no point getting people to vote if you don't bother actually implementing the vote they actually take part.
Okay.
Can I please, Ian, would you mind if I have my chance to answer the question?
I was actually just addressing what you said.
Hang on, Julia has not actually spoken on this. Let's give her a moment.
I actually agree with the gentleman in green when you said that we were lied to in the referendum campaign, because of course we all remember that leaflet we were sent. 9 million quid of our money was spent on it, and it said two things. It said it's a once-in-a-lifetime vote, and it said the government will implement the decision you make. It's really I don't believe for a moment that democracy stopped in 2016, or that we shouldn't be looking at views again and seeing how views have changed. But the normal rule with an election, for instance, is that as a vote happens, we implement that vote, and then we have another chance to change it. If you want to have a second, third, fourth, fifth, 20th referendum, once the decision of this referendum is implemented, go for it. But first of all, you have to enact that. Well, then maybe they could all club together if they're so keen.
OK. I'm going to move on, because there are so many ways we can cut this particular cake. If it's even as delicious as that, I'm not sure. But before we do, question time comes from Belfast next week. I just want to tell you that, where we'll have the very latest on, I think I said this last week, the key Brexit votes that will be happening. You might know more about that than I do, James. Anyway, and the week after that, we will be in Sheffield, so call 0330 123 9988 if you'd like to be in the audience. And it's pretty lively here. Why would you not want to join in? Or go to the Question Time website and follow the instructions. So let's have our next question, please, from Sarah Simpson.
Is the Prime Minister putting party before country by not seeking cross-party consensus on her deal?
Clive, let's start with you.
Simply put, yes. And I'll tell you why. Because when I spoke to my constituents, which Norwich South was a Remain seat, I spoke to many of those who had voted Remain, like myself, and I asked them what we do now, because we lost that vote. And most of the people I spoke to overwhelmingly said, fair cop. I think we need to try and find a compromise, one that protects jobs, protects the economy, try to make the best of the mess that this is. And I was really humbled by that, because people felt that they were going to try and do the right thing, despite the fact they didn't think this was the right thing to do. But what happened in the intervening period was, apart from a general election, a cynical general election that was called to basically push through the hard red lines that Theresa May believed that she could if she had a larger majority, there was no conversation with wider society, with the British people, with trade unions, with civil society. There was a conversation with the Conservative Party. It was an internal conversation, and it has led us to the place that we are now, where you have a humiliated Prime Minister with a deal which has been defeated twice and is now in a shambles. And this is the situation that we find ourselves in. So personally, my view is that there was a way out of this. And I think listening and watching the argument that was taking place before, it was a mirror being held up to Parliament. It was quite shocking to watch, actually. And it reminded me of the fact that in our politics, in our first past the post politics, it is winner takes all. And actually what we needed in this politics, sensible grown-up politics, was a politics where we could come together and find consensus. And our political system has failed us, and I have to say, we failed ourselves. We should be able to do so much better.
James, the question is the Prime Minister putting party before country by not seeking cross-party compromise? I mean, when you look at what's happening with Theresa May trying to keep Jacob Rees-Mogg and his cohorts on side, trying to keep the DUP on side, many would say that is putting party before country in an effort to keep the Tory party together, come what may.
Well, Sarah, the point you make about to whom do you owe duty? We owe a duty to the country, and the duty that we owe them is to deliver on the referendum result as promised. Now, the challenge when you have a binary choice like we have in the referendum is there is no comments box at the bottom of your ballot paper saying, write in here what exactly you meant by your referendum vote. So the government has to interpret the outcome of that vote. And
but none of that is a reason to not seek cross-party compromise, is it?
I'm coming on to that. And so when the government is formulating what it means to deliver that Brexit result, it does reach across all areas of the House, and we have had, from the very start of this process, we have had Labour members of Parliament voting. We've had members from other parties, not the Scottish National Party, I admit. But when the Prime Minister,
it's before then. Surely it's almost 3 years now. It's about the compromise before that point, isn't it?
Yeah, but when the Prime Minister said that she wanted also to speak to the Labour Party, the response we got back from the Labour Party was, no, we don't want to talk to you. We want to have a general election. That's not true. The Labour Party's position for a very, very long time was, no, we want nothing to do with this. We want to have a general election. That was the Labour Party's position.
So when did Theresa May reach out to the Labour Party? How early in the process did she do that?
It was only when Jeremy Corbyn was embarrassed. The opinion polls plummeted for the Labour Party when he flatly refused to even meet the Prime Minister. Did he finally say, oh, yes, I'll get involved?
James,
we have been
but hang on a second, just one second. When did Theresa May, I mean, maybe she did not, and I just don't know, when did Theresa May, in this process, I mean, it's been almost 3 years now since the referendum, when did she reach out to Labour, the SNP, Lib Dems, et al.?
It was January.
There have been Labour people in the division lobbies with us throughout this process. We speak to... I speak to Labour Party colleagues. Maybe you should speak to some of yourself, Clive. I speak to your Labour Party colleagues I speak to your Labour Party colleagues quite regularly, and a number of them are unbelievably frustrated with their own party leadership's intransigence on this. The game playing, the politicking. There is a deal on the table which will get us out of the EU in good order. They keep voting against.
Can I just come in, James? Where I come from is a term here. It's called chatting breeze. You are chatting breeze. Your lips are moving, but nothing is coming out. It's just warm air. Yeah? Nothing you have said just then is actually true, or most of it isn't, because I can tell you now, the first 2 years, I can say it here because I'm not in Parliament, but the first 2 years ago, when this happened, when Brexit came about, I was down in Glastonbury, actually, in the left field tent, and I remember John McDonnell standing up and saying, this is a mess. Let's see if we can work together with the Conservative government to work out how we can take this forward and minimise the risks to our economy. That's what he said. And what happened? We got the Lancaster House red lines from Theresa May, which was a conversation with your party, with your ideological splits, no one else. That's what it's about. This is about holding the Conservative Party together, not our country. And that's what your party has done for the last 2 years, because you feel you're born to rule this country and you're not. Simple as that.
I've been talking to your colleagues for 2 years, mate. You should try.
Can I just say, a plague on both of your houses?
Woman there with a pink scarf.
Isn't it the case that really Labour and Conservatives, SNP, all parties, should have been negotiating and agreeing right back immediately after the referendum and agreeing what the national strategy was going to be and not leaving it until January when it's far too late to do anything?
Yeah. Woman there with the glasses.
Hi. I think part of the problem is that the political discourse is so aggressive. And as we witnessed with the argument, it's very... We don't like to listen to experts anymore. And I don't know why. Aren't they the ones with the information? And it's all about opinion and people not wanting to be wrong. And sometimes we're human, we get things wrong, we're allowed to change our mind. And if we're a bit more accepting of other people's opinions, maybe cross-party politics would be a little bit easier.
And that has introduced a different tone into the whole debate. Yes, the man there.
At the moment, Parliament, it's very divisive, it's very tribal. They've made a complete hash of it. If you talk about having a people's vote again and you want to put it back to the people, then the logical thing to do is that we had a referendum before and the vote was to leave. So, rather than saying it's Theresa May's or the government's deal or remain, logically it should be the government's deal or leave without a deal. Because if you don't do that, you will disenfranchise millions of people, because people that voted to leave may not want to vote, they certainly won't want to vote Remain, and they may not wish to vote for Theresa May's deal. So in which case, Remain will win. And I have to say, if Remain wins, a lot of people, like me, if it goes back and democracy is overturned, I will never vote for a politician, a local politician, councillor or government in main parliamentary elections. I will never vote again as far as I know.
No, you mustn't do that.
That's what worries me.
No, we vote them out. That's what we do. We don't not vote. We vote them out, and we vote in a parliament that represents our views. We may have to wait a few weeks, few months, few years, but we will have our say, and they will have to listen to us.
Sarah's question was, has the Prime Minister put her party interest before country? And I'm afraid, and I'm sad to say, that the answer is yes. But if we look at the United Kingdom, please remember that you've got parliaments in Cardiff, in Edinburgh, and we're supposed to have a parliament in Belfast as well. And when the Scottish Parliament was established in 1999, it was done in such a way as that we have proportional representation. It's supposed to stop any one party getting a majority. And it's actually done that in every occasion, bar one. So we've got a situation that we've had an SNP government since 2007, but most of that is a minority administration. And we've got to get a budget through every year, but we have to do that by working across party. Now, as an example, both the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly simultaneously passed a motion last week that had cross-party support rejecting what Theresa May is doing, because we've got that experience of working on that cross-party basis. And I'm sad to say that the reason that this hasn't happened at Westminster is because of the Prime Minister. And the real issue here is that when she went to the country in 2017, thought she was going to come back with a thumping majority, got a bloody nose, and I met with her the following week. And I said, look, we have to recognise that this is a parliament of minorities. And where we can work together, we will work with you. But the Prime Minister has never sought to do that until we got to January, James. Now, in terms of the Scottish Government, just as an example, we've published Scotland's Place in Europe. There have been various versions of that. The first one was way back in December 2016. and it sought to compromise with the UK government. Our compromise position was staying in the single market and the customs union because we believe that
briefly,
that was the best
because I
answer.
do want to get to the audience
But the whole
as well.
point is that Theresa May has sought to try and bring her fractured party together. The Tory party has been split over Europe over the last 40 years, and the rest of us are paying a price for that Tory split. That's the reality.
Man in the blue seat.
So May's party is so split. You talk about your government and the deal they've brought back. The two leaders of the Leave campaign, the main Leave campaign, Gove and Boris Johnson, entered the aisle on different sides of that vote. One voted for and one voted against. The Leave campaign itself can't agree on your Leave deal.
Man at the back in the blue sweater. Yes.
Isn't actually the issue, I disagree with Ian, isn't it the Fixed Term Parliament Act that has caused this issue?
That's part of it. Part of it.
OK. I think there's probably quite a few things that might have caused this issue, but... yes, the man there with the blue sweater on. Yes.
Yeah, I don't see how you can lay the blame at anybody else's feet other than the government, which is kind of led by Theresa May.
You had to think about that for a while.
Sorry?
You had to think about that for a while.
I was trying to find the right word. I mean, I have some sympathy with her. I have some respect for her for kind of, you know, sticking in there and all the rest of it. I don't know how many people could stand in the place that she's in and survive, but having said that, you may say that she's doing it for the sake of her own party, but her own party isn't playing ball. You know, the gentleman back here talks about the arrogance of the Remainers. I think that arrogance of the ERG and the rogue cabinet members who refuse to compromise a jot in order to get this deal through are to blame. And you know, the only way I see this working for the country is to get a compromise deal through. The Remainers don't get exactly what they want. The Leavers don't get exactly what they want, but there's something that represents enough of the views in that deal to serve us all.
OK. Just going back to... Catherine, as the non-partisan person on this panel.
Just going back to Sarah's question, if you just go back to the summer of 2016, Theresa May gave that terrific speech, acceptance speech on the steps of Downing Street, and then there was silence pretty much for 3 months, plastered over by the phrase Brexit means Brexit. And in that time could have been used for whether it be a royal commission or something of that sort, bringing a group of people together. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. That was a lost window, and then we had the Tory party conference and the red lines were drawn up, and that already paved the way for the sort of Brexit we were going to have. And going forward, this might not be music to your ears, but we're only at the end of the beginning. The next stage is going to be far more difficult than this stage. This might not cheer you up, but this is absolutely true, because negotiating the future deal is going to be really complicated. And what I sincerely hope going forward is that there is more cross-party collaboration and some really deep thinking about what we want, because this will already hold up any negotiations for the future trade agreement.
Let's take another question from Fahad. OK, just before I do, actually, Fahad, that's you there, is it? I'll be there in a second. Before you speak to it, Clive, just as you were saying in the audience there, you know, get the Leavers to... the Leavers won't get what they want, the Remainers won't get what they want, but it'll be a compromise. And Clive said to you, would you accept that? And you said...
I said no.
But isn't that the problem?
No, of course it's not the problem. The whole... No, it's not. The EU referendum was you can't be a little bit in. You're either in or you're out. It's why we had a leave or remain, a yes-no referendum.
But it's about the deal. It's about compromising about the deal, Julian.
You can compromise about the exact terminology of the deal, but when it comes to issues like staying part of the customs union or the single market, or having the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, having a say, no, that's not leave.
Well, how do you... But you don't know that, do you?
I don't do what Boris Johnson says.
Well, he was the leader of the Leave campaign.
He was one of the leaders of the Leave campaign.
But Julian, how do you know what people think leave means?
No, I know what I think. I'm saying that you asked me, would I accept that? And I said no. Can I just answer the question, though, that was asked by Sarah, which was, you know, is the Prime Minister putting her party before the country? I don't think she is. I think she's putting her own personal ego before the country. And I think it is time, not just for the men in grey suits to pay her a visit, but I think it's time for the men in white coats. I think she's completely deluded.
Fahad, let's have your question now.
So with May's deal dead as a dodo, has she lost the confidence of her party, our government and our nation?
Well, there's a few people in your party think that is the case. I mean, you've got Nicky Morgan saying Theresa May's position could be very difficult if the agreement goes down on Tuesday, which of course it did. You've got Charles Walker, if a deal doesn't get through and it's voted down, I think there'll have to be a general election. I mean, this is coming from within your own party. Is she... You know, we've had Brino, Brexit in name only. Is she... I've heard someone say this today, Lino leader in name only.
There has never been a Prime Minister that hasn't had criticism from within their own party. It is an unfortunate byproduct of the job. The Prime Minister inherited...
She also suffered a historic defeat, James.
Yeah, the Prime Minister inherited a responsibility to deliver the referendum result. It's something she's taken very, very seriously. I absolutely believe she has attempted to discharge this in a way that can bring as many people together as possible. Now, as you say, there have been some big defeats. There have been people on the panel saying, oh, what you need to do is have something. In fact, again, also in the audience, people saying you have to have a deal that has enough things for the Brexiteers, the Brexit voters, to feel comfortable, enough people that voted Remain to feel comfortable. But it's not going to ever be the case that everyone can be completely happy with absolutely everything. And yet we then have, you know, Clive and Ian saying, oh, we absolutely cannot leave without a deal.
No, but hang on. The question is, has she lost the confidence? Well, I've slightly lost track. Okay. Has she lost the confidence of her party, her parliament, her nation? Is it time for her to go? That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, and I said no to that.
OK.
No, sorry, if I didn't, let me answer that. No. And now the point I was making.
OK,
so the point I was making
is
she has attempted to put forward a deal that can get cross-party support. And people who say, oh, why don't you put a deal that we can get cross-party support, they've rejected it and then not come back with anything credible as an alternative.
That's not true.
That's the problem.
That's not true.
For example, there's lots of ideas that are out in Parliament. Labour's amendment today suggested time for us to examine other ideas, and she voted against it.
And it didn't have the confidence.
Right, so she's not interested in exploring those alternative ideas. We are where we are because of her red lines.
No, because what we saw through various votes over the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, last couple of days, is that there isn't an alternative that anyone's put forward that can get the confidence of the whole House, with the exception of the amendment that Graham Brady put forward, which basically said the deal that you put forward with some changes to the backstop, that's exactly what she's been pursuing.
I'm going to ask you all the same question, reasonably briefly, because we haven't got that much time left. Ian Blackford.
You know, what was really striking when we had the debate on the meaningful vote 2 days ago, and I looked at the Conservative benches, they were half empty. There was a clear expression that Conservative MPs have lost their confidence in the Prime Minister. That's clear. Parliament has certainly lost confidence in the Prime Minister, and the country has. It's her own fault. She hasn't sought to find a way that she could create that confidence through taking the whole of the United Kingdom forward. She's been tin-eared. She hasn't listened. She's now paying the price, and we are in a moment of crisis that all of us have to find a way through from.
Julia?
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely lost the confidence of many of her MPs. What MPs say to you on television screens isn't often what they're texting us journalists later on.
But do you think she should go?
I think she should have gone long ago. I wish MPs had had the sense in December to make sure she'd gone. In normal times, a Prime Minister who suffers 2 of the 4 biggest defeats in parliamentary history would herself choose to leave. She would.
And who? Do you know? I was just going to ask the same thing. Who do you think would replace her?
I don't think there could be anyone worse than Theresa May at this
But who do you think would be better?
I think it could be. I mean, again, if you want to have a compromise, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't even agree with Labour Party policy.
No, but who would be?
Genuinely, for me, it would have to be someone who campaigned for leave. I think Dominic Raab is one of the front runners, although many people are saying Jeremy Hunt. I'm not a Tory party member. I don't get to say.
OK. Do you think Theresa May should go? Do you know, I think you might say yes to that.
Well,
But also, you heard what
I think George Freeman. I think George Freeman is tweeting. George Freeman, MP, is tweeting that Theresa May needs to go now. I think that's a growing consensus. I think not only has her party lost a lack of faith in her, lost faith in her, Parliament certainly has. I think the public have as well, that she is the person to lead us through this. I know she's lost her voice, she's lost a grip as well, and ultimately, I think...
Well, it's not her fault she's lost her voice.
No, it's not. But losing a grip is her own down to herself and her leadership. I think, actually, though, you're going to struggle to find a Conservative to step up, because I think many of them realise that she is, in effect now, the mess that they've made, they want her to be. She's a human shield, as such. They want her to deal with this. And it's the country, once again, that's paying for that.
Catherine, would it make any difference, do you think, if Theresa May did fall on her sword?
No, not a lot, because the problems are still there. We're due to leave the European Union in 2 weeks' time, on the 29th of March. That is the default position. But I would just like to go back to the gentleman's question and take the first part of the question: is Theresa May's deal as dead as a dodo? Actually, I don't think it is, because I think it's probably all that's left on the table at the moment. And while it's been voted down already twice, and it may well be voted down again next week, the pressure may become so great for a meaningful vote for that it finally does go through. I suspect it may have some life left in it yet.
I also agree that Theresa May leaving is not going to have much difference, and the actual front runner to become the new Tory leader is actually Boris Johnson, which is quite frankly completely terrifying. So.
There's a woman here. You've had your hand up for absolutely ages. Yes.
I think we need a second vote, because when we did the first vote...
Hang on, I thought we talked about that.
I haven't made my point, I'm sorry. We didn't have a clue what we were doing for the first time. We need a second chance after seeing the mess we got into, we need a second chance.
Hang on. This is not the Jeremy Kyle show. Let the woman make her point.
OK. We need a second vote because we didn't have a clue what we were voting for the first time. Now, knowing the mess we are into, and this debate is kind of evidence of it, we know what mess we are going to be getting ourselves into.
The man there in the Aaron sweater.
Thank you. The thing about the reason that Theresa May's deal has constantly failed is because it's a toxic deal and it's Lisbon Treaty light. And the reason that I voted to leave was I didn't have anything to do with the Lisbon Treaty, because it's a ensnarement that's going to keep us trapped in perpetuity. So it was never going to work. And it's beyond me, as a citizen, to understand why they've been banging away about any kind of deal at all, because any kind of deal is toxic. It just totally defeats the whole purpose of leaving.
The woman there.
I just wanted to say that I'm sitting here shocked at how people treat each other in the whole debate, not even letting each other finish, or listening to empty phrases like, oh, we just have to have confidence in the nation. It's not time for these phrases. And it's also not time to just cut people off without listening to them. There are people's futures at stake here.
Hang on.
I feel like I don't really feel that. There are people's futures at stake. As an EU national, there's my future in this country at stake. And it's not about whoever can shout their opinion the loudest.
Well, on that note, our hour is up. Almost everybody's had their hand up. I've got round as many of you as I can. It's been pretty heated, I have to say. I hope you feel you've got your points across. Our next programme is in Belfast. As I said earlier, the following week we will be in Sheffield, and there we will have the boss of Next, Simon Wolfson, and the former Greek finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis. He's got a bit to say about the EU. Call 0330 123 9988 if you'd like to be in the audience, or go to the Question Time website. You can follow the instructions there. And if you want to have your say on tonight's topics, as always, you can join Adrian, Charles and guests on Question Time Extra Time. That is on 5 Live right now. But for now, thank you very much to my panel, to my audience, thank you, and of course to you at home for watching from Ealing in West London. Bye-bye.
Geeky, cheeky gossip about the latest Brexit goings-on from Westminster and Brussels. Download the BBC Sounds app to listen to Brexit Cast, available now.